In this lecture segment, we are talking about mosque architecture. We will first discuss the transformation of the Hagia Sophia into a mosque, and then talk about a mosque in Spain. When Constantinople was taken over by the Ottoman Turks in 1453 and the Byzantine Empire ended, the Hagia Sophia was transformed from an Orthodox church using Byzantine style to a mosque using Byzantine style. As part of its conversion from being a church to being a mosque, new elements were added and other elements were removed to suit its new purpose as a mosque. And this is another example of art and architecture being used to express conquest. The Ottomans took over this masterpiece of the Byzantine Empire, shifting it from being about the authority of the Christian Roman Empire to being about the power of the Ottoman Empire. First, in keeping with the aniconic approach to decorating religious structures, figural works of art in the structure were removed, plastered over, or whitewashed. You see examples here in the pendentives and also here. Scholars are currently scanning the walls of the Hagia Sophia, now a museum, trying to determine what the original Christian decoration looked like. If we go in closer to the apse end, to here, you can see that the new elements include a mihrab, a sacred niche, set into the Qibla wall that marks the direction of Mecca and Saudi Arabia, the most sacred site in Islam. You see the Qibla wall here, and notice that it is slightly off-center, so it is precisely directed towards Mecca, which for a mosque in Pakistan would be pointing southwest. For a mosque in Istanbul, it would point southeast, for example. And into the wall is set the mihrab, a sacred niche that designates a holy place, a feature of religious structures during this period that we have often seen. The interior also includes a minbar, a pulpit, where the imam, a Muslim teacher, would climb to teach the faithful. We've talked before about how Christian worship at this structure worked. During the 6th century, the worshippers' access to the most sacred part of the church was restricted, and during a service they were confined to the gallery level and the aisles, while a ritual procession took place in the naos. By contrast, as a mosque, the main space under the dome would have been filled with worshippers engaged in prayer. The Hagia Sophia also received minarets on the exterior, towers from which the call to prayer would be issued 5 times a day. We're going to go to Cordova in Spain and look at a mosque built in an area that was under Islamic control for a long time. But control of the city and the structure changes, and we can see how the structure bears evidence of those shifts of power between Islam and Christianity and its changing identities. In this aerial view, we see the components of mosque architecture. We have a minaret on the exterior of the structure from which the call to prayer would be issued. Christians covered it in a bell tower. It stands in front of a courtyard where ritual washing could occur before prayer. That would be a transition space between the regular world and entering the world of the mosque. But we also see what looks like a Christian structure plopped right into the middle of the mosque. This mosque was constructed at the same location as a temple to a Roman god, followed by a Christian church built by the Visigoths, and then a mosque was built after Islamic control was established. And then when the area was reclaimed by Christians in 1236, portions were gradually altered to have the look and feel of a Christian church. Following the pattern we've seen so many times, a new power takes the sacred space of an old power and converts it to suit their worship, showing triumph through architecture. This site remains controversial, as Muslims today have requested and been denied the opportunity to pray at this site. In this plan of the structure, we see again the minaret and the courtyard, the mihrab in the Qibla wall, as well as the main mosque space, a prayer hall called a hypostyle hall, a room filled with a forest of columns. A hypostyle hall was relatively easy to enlarge over time, as is the case at this mosque with multiple additions that you see in this plan. In this view of the hypostyle hall, the columns support double arches springing from the columns. Spolia, or recycled materials from the previous Christian church at this location, were incorporated as columns in the hypostyle hall. The effect is a space that is overwhelming and even dizzying for the viewer that, like we've seen at Hagia Sophia, San Vitale, and the Dome of the Rock, creates a sacred space that feels different than the regular world. The arches are striped with alternating brick and white stone, creating polychromed or multicolored arches. And this type of construction creates a prayer hall with enough room for massive worship as communities gather together for Friday prayers. As is the case at other mosques, the mihrab is a niche in the Qibla wall that marks the direction of Mecca, and this one is marked with a horseshoe arch, a Visigothic architectural feature that came to be a defining element of Islamic architecture. And as you enter this space behind the mihrab, you'll see, as you look up, an elaborate dome added in 965. Again, we see a culture marking the most sacred part of a structure with a domed space. Think about the Christ mosaic at San Vitale, for example. The dome is supported on squinches instead of the pendentives used at the Hagia Sophia. Both are approaches to bridging the space between the wall supporting the dome and the shape at the base of the dome. Use of squinches gives the dome a more staggered or tiered geometric effect. The repeated geometric forms and an array of patterns and inscriptions covering the elaborate dome typify Islamic art. And bringing our discussion full circle, this site was decorated by a mosaicist sent by the Byzantine emperor in Constantinople, showing again how the visual traditions of one culture are used by other cultures. One of the key elements of the decoration used in the dome at the Mihrab at the Great Mosque at Cordova is calligraphy, taking words that convey meaning and turning their written form into art. Words from the Quran are sacred, carefully preserved orally between the death of Muhammad and when the words were written down. Their cultural and religious significance is visualized here at this mihrab in the Metropolitan Museum of Art today. We know its basic purpose, to mark the Qibla wall and the direction of Mecca. This mihrab came from a madrasa, a school in an Iranian city famous for this stunning decoration in blue tile. So it had a religious function, but it also had a didactic function, or teaching a lesson, a way for students to direct their prayers during the school day. We have Arabic text written in different types of script, and in each section, a different excerpt from scripture is written. Keep in mind that Arabic is seen in Islam at this time as the language of deity, a perfect language, so these words are literally sacred. On the outside, read from right to left, is a quote from scripture. On the next layer, written in a different script, are the 5 pillars of Islam. And then in this box is a reminder about what the purpose of the mosque was as a place for the faithful. So we see meaningful decoration that takes sacred text and turns it into pattern, marking this sacred niche, this directional focus of worship. We see Islamic art being built on the foundation of Byzantine art, which was the dominant artistic and cultural force in this area of the world. And we continue to see the way new powers adapt existing local visual traditions in their art and architecture, so that new creations seem familiar and speak a local language. We also see continuing incidents of old sacred structures and their materials being adapted or used in the establishment of new sacred structures, as art and architecture visualizes the history of peoples and cultures.